Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're diving deep into a book that's, it's really sparked global conversations and controversies. Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses.
Oh yeah, controversial one for sure.
It's a wild ride, this book. It blends magical realism with sharp commentary on faith identity and the immigrant experience.
To unpack there.
For this deep dive, we'll be focusing on the main text of the book, so we're not looking at any of the preface or introduction or anything like that, just the meat and potatoes.
Sounds good.
So
It's a book that's, it's much more than just the headlines it generated. It's really a complex exploration of what happens when the boundaries between reality and dreams, the sacred and the profane, they start to blur.
Right. And the story kicks off with a bang. Literally,
Yeah.
a hijacked plane explodes midair, leaving two Indian-born actors, Gibreel Farishta and Saladin Chamcha. They're plummeting toward the English Channel.
Talk about starting a story off with a bang.
Yeah. And that's where Rushdie's magical realism takes center stage. Instead of, perishing, Gibreel and Saladin miraculously survive the fall.
It's a miracle.
And Gibreel, he begins to experience angelic transformations, hearing voices, having visions. Saladin, on the other hand, he undergoes a more unsettling metamorphosis, taking on increasingly devilish characteristics.
So they both survive, but their experiences are very different.
It's as if their plunge in the sky throws them into this liminal space, between worlds, where their identities and perceptions of reality, they're just completely upended.
Yeah, they're kind of caught between two worlds.
But their transformations aren't just about the physical. They reflect something deeper about their internal struggles.
Precisely. Gibreel, he's always embraced his Indian heritage, and he seems to connect with a kind of spiritual side that he might have suppressed while he was chasing Bollywood stardom. Saladin, though, he represents a different side of that immigrant experience. He desperately wants to assimilate into British society. He rejects his Indian roots, and he ends up feeling increasingly alienated, even demonized.
And this tension between assimilation and holding on to one's cultural identity, that's a thread that runs through the entire book, right?
Absolutely. Rushdie doesn't shy away from portraying the complexities and contradictions that are faced by immigrants. It's not a simple choice between two worlds, but rather a constant negotiation between them, a struggle to find a sense of belonging in a place that often feels hostile or indifferent.
We see this play out even further when Saladin returns to India. After years of living in England, he's expecting a homecoming, a chance to reconnect with his roots. But instead, he finds himself even more out of place.
Oh, that's gotta be tough.
His father has remarried to a woman, also named Nazreen.
Wait, the same name as...
The same name as Saladin's deceased mother, which throws him completely off balance.
Wow, talk about a mind trip.
It's like he's haunted by ghosts of the past, both personal and cultural, that he can't seem to escape.
Yeah, he just can't escape his past.
And then there's Zini Vakil. She's this vibrant, independent woman from Saladin's past who embodies a more authentic side of India that he struggles to connect with.
She seems like a force to be reckoned with.
She's not afraid to call him out on his anglicized ways. I remember that passage where she mocks his name, Mr. Toady. And she says, "See, you can't even say your own name properly anymore."
Ouch. That's gotta sting.
Such a powerful moment.
Yeah.
And it highlights the psychological toll of assimilation. Saladin has tried so hard to fit in, to erase his Indianness, that he's lost touch with a fundamental part of himself.
He's lost himself in a way.
It's as if he's being punished for trying to deny his heritage.
Interesting.
Which makes me think of Gibreel's angelic transformation. He's embracing his Indian roots, and it's as though he's being rewarded for it. Is Rushdie suggesting that there's a right or wrong way to navigate this immigrant experience?
I don't think it's about right or wrong, but rather about the consequences of our choices. Gibreel's embrace of his heritage, it brings him a sense of spiritual fulfillment, but it also comes with its own set of challenges. He starts to lose control. He's becoming more erratic and unpredictable as his angelic persona takes over.
So it's not all sunshine and roses. And then,
Yeah.
just when you think you've got a handle on Gibreel and Saladin's story,
Yeah.
Rushdie throws us a curveball. We're suddenly transported to a completely different setting and time period, the story of Maud, a prophet figure loosely based on the Prophet Muhammad.
Now that's a bold move.
This is where the book really starts to push boundaries, challenging traditional narratives and provoking strong reactions.
I can see why.
It's a fictional reimagining of Islamic history, exploring themes of faith, doubt, and the very nature of revelation.
Heavy stuff.
And there are definitely some provocative elements here. The portrayal of the prophet's wives as prostitutes, In a brothel called The Curtain is one example that immediately comes to mind. It's understandable why some would find this offensive.
Yeah, that's pretty controversial.
But it's important to remember that Rushdie is working within the realm of fiction here. He's not presenting this as historical fact, but rather using these reinterpretations to examine the power of belief and the complexities of religious narratives.
So he's using fiction to explore some really complex and sensitive issues.
Right. It's like he's asking us to consider how stories, even sacred ones, are shaped and reshaped over time, and how those reinterpretations can be both empowering and dangerous.
That's a really interesting way to think about it.
And this idea of reinterpreting stories, it extends to the Satanic Verses themselves. In the novel, Mahound briefly accepts 3 pagan goddesses alongside Allah, before renouncing them as a temptation from the devil.
A test of faith.
This fictional episode explores the idea that even prophets can experience doubt and struggle with their faith.
Even prophets are human.
It raises questions about the nature of revelation and the human element in the construction of religious beliefs.
So he's really getting at the core of how we understand faith and religion.
So we have these 2 main narratives running parallel. Gibreel and Saladin wrestling with their identities as immigrants, and this reimagined story of Mahound that challenges traditional religious narratives. But there are other characters and storylines woven in as well, adding layers of complexity to the book, like Baal, the exiled poet, and Aisha, who leads a pilgrimage across the Arabian Sea.
It's like a tapestry of stories.
And these seemingly disparate stories connect to the larger themes of the book in really fascinating ways. Baal, for example, represents the artist who is persecuted for his words, mirroring the challenges faced by Salman Rushdie himself.
That's a powerful parallel.
Aisha, with her fervent followers. She embodies the dangers of blind faith, demonstrating how religious devotion can be twisted into something destructive.
So he's showing us both the positive and negative aspects of faith.
It's like Rushdie's creating this kaleidoscope of perspectives on faith, identity, and the clash between tradition and modernity. He's not offering easy answers, but rather prompting us to grapple with the contradictions and complexities of human experience.
He's making us think.
Exactly. And he doesn't shy away from depicting the violence that can erupt when faith becomes fanatical. The city of Gibreel, where Mahound establishes his religion, is ultimately consumed by fire, a consequence of the zealotry and intolerance that can accompany rigid belief systems.
A powerful image of the destructive power of fanaticism.
Which brings us back to Gibreel and Saladin. There's this terrifying scene where the Shandar B&B, this boarding house where Saladin is staying, it catches fire. Gibreel, now fully embracing his angelic powers, swoops in to save Saladin from the flames.
Like a guardian angel.
It's a pivotal moment in their relationship. Despite their differences and the ways they've hurt each other, there's a sense of redemption, of one flawed being rescuing another.
A glimmer of hope amidst the chaos.
It suggests that even amidst the chaos and darkness, compassion and forgiveness are possible.
That's a beautiful thought.
It's interesting how fire seems to symbolize both destruction and purification in the novel. The fire in Gibreel represents the destructive force of zealotry, while the fire at the B&B becomes a catalyst for a kind of rebirth or reconciliation.
Fire as a symbol of transformation.
And this brings us to Saladin's decision to return to India to be with his dying father.
It's a homecoming of sorts.
There's a poignant encounter between Saladin and Gibreel on the plain, hinting at a kind of reconciliation, a recognition of their shared experiences as immigrants grappling with identity and belonging.
Coming full circle.
The powerful moment of closure. But it's not a simple happy ending. Saladin's journey is far from over.
His journey continues.
And it's clear that Gibreel's struggles are far from over either. He disappears after another scandal, and then supposedly dies in a plane crash. But things are rarely as they seem in this book.
Right. There's always another layer to the story.
I'm already hooked. There's so much to unpack in the Satanic Verses.
And we've only just scratched the surface. Before we dive into what happens next, I think it's important to, take a step back and appreciate how Rushdie uses language to reflect these complex themes. He weaves together English, Hindi, and Urdu, creating this linguistic tapestry that mirrors the hybridity of immigrant identities. There's this constant interplay between different worlds, different ways of seeing and speaking.
It's like he's challenging the very idea of a singular, fixed identity, both through his characters and for language itself.
Exactly.
He's showing us that language is a fluid, dynamic thing, just like our sense of self.
And that's what makes the Satanic Verses so thought-provoking. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our beliefs, and about the societies we live in.
One of the things that really struck me about the book is how it plays with this idea of good versus evil.
Mm.
We see this most clearly in Gibreel's angelic transformation and Saladin's, demonic one. But as we discussed earlier, it's not a simple black and white situation.
Not at all. Rushdie deliberately blurs the lines between good and evil. Gibreel, for all his angelic qualities, is capable of great anger and violence. Remember how he treats Alalia Cohn later in the story?
Right.
His jealousy and possessiveness lead to some truly disturbing actions.
And Saladin, despite his devilish appearance, shows moments of compassion and vulnerability. He cares deeply for his father, even though their relationship is strained. And he tries to help Gibreel, even when Gibreel pushes him away.
It's as if each character contains elements of both good and evil. It challenges the reader to move beyond simplistic binaries and to recognize the complexity of human nature.
It's like Rushdie is saying that we all have the potential for both darkness and light within us.
Yeah.
It's how we choose to act on those impulses that ultimately defines who we are.
Precisely. And this complexity is further emphasized through Rushdie's use of dreams.
Okay.
They become a space where the subconscious is revealed, where hidden desires and fears manifest, and the impossible becomes possible.
It's not just the characters who are dreaming either. London itself often feels like a dreamscape, this surreal, almost nightmarish world, where the boundaries between reality and fantasy are constantly shifting.
Yes, and this blurring of boundaries is a hallmark of magical realism. It allows Rushdie to explore themes of identity, faith, and the immigrant experience in a way that transcends the limitations of traditional storytelling.
Speaking of which, one of the most fascinating aspects of the book is the story of Aisha. She emerges from the Arabian Sea, claiming to be a prophetess and gathering thousands of followers for a pilgrimage. It feels like a parable, a cautionary tale about the dangers of blind faith.
Aisha's story is both compelling and tragic. She starts with good intentions, seeking to empower the marginalized and challenge societal norms. But her charisma and unwavering belief in her own divine mission lead to disastrous consequences. Her followers, blinded by their devotion, follow her blindly into the sea, ultimately drowning.
It's a powerful reminder that faith, when taken to extremes, can become a destructive force. And it raises questions about the responsibility of leaders, especially those who claim to speak for a higher power.
Absolutely, and we see echoes of this in the Mahound narrative as well. Mahound, like Aisha, starts with a message of hope and change, but as his power grows, so too does the potential for corruption and violence. The city of Jahilia, consumed by fire, becomes a symbol of the dangers of unchecked power and religious fanaticism.
And this theme of power connects back to Saladin and Gibreel as well. Gibreel, with his angelic powers, literally becomes a larger-than-life figure. Saladin, though initially resistant to his devilish transformation, eventually uses his altered appearance to his advantage, manipulating and exploiting others.
Exactly. The Satanic Verses is a novel deeply concerned with the ways in which power operates, on both personal and societal levels, whether it's the power of faith, the power of storytelling, or the power dynamics within relationships. Rushdie forces us to confront the complexities and potential pitfalls of power in all its forms.
And he does so with a blend of seriousness and humor. That's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
There are moments in the book that are genuinely laugh-out-loud funny, even amidst the darkness and controversy, like the scene where Saladin, in his demonic form, ends up working in a pickle factory.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. It's absurd, it's funny, and yet it also speaks to Saladin's alienation and his struggle to find his place in the world. Rushdie's use of humor is so skillful. It's never gratuitous. It always serves a purpose, whether it's to expose hypocrisy, to challenge authority, or to simply provide a moment of relief amidst the intensity of the narrative.
And speaking of humor, I love how Rushdie plays with names in the book. S.S. Sisodia, the flamboyant film producer, immediately comes to mind.
His names are often satirical, poking fun at the characters' pretensions and the absurdities of the world they inhabit. They add a layer of playfulness to the novel, reminding us that even in the face of profound questions and challenging themes, there's still room for wit and a bit of lightheartedness.
It's like he's using humor as a weapon, a way to deflate pomposity and expose the silliness of social conventions.
Exactly, and that humor is part of what makes the Satanic Verses so subversive. It's not just a novel, it's a challenge to the status quo, an invitation to question everything we thought we knew about faith, identity, and the power of stories.
Now, we left off with Gibreel's supposed death in a plane crash. But as you hinted earlier, things are rarely as they seem in this book. What really happened to Gibreel after he disappeared?
Well, Saladin is back in London, trying to piece his life back together after the tumultuous events in India. He's haunted by memories of his transformation, his estranged wife, Pamela, and his unresolved feelings for Zini Vakil, who has resurfaced in his life. He's trying to outrun his past, but it keeps catching up with him.
And then he gets a phone call that changes everything.
Precisely. It's Gibreel, very much alive. Calling from a remote location up north, he's been hiding out, trying to escape the pressures of fame, the public scrutiny, and perhaps even himself. He's found refuge with a woman named Alleluia Cone, a mountain climber who represents a kind of purity and strength.
She sounds like quite a character.
She is. Allie, as she's called, is determined to help Gibreel find peace, to strip away the layers of his celebrity persona and reconnect him with his humanity. But Gibreel is still battling his inner demons, his angelic visions, and a growing paranoia that makes him lash out at Allie.
It sounds like a volatile situation.
It is. And Saladin, drawn into their world, witnesses firsthand the unraveling of Gibreel's sanity.
So what ultimately leads to Gibreel's disappearance from the Freekirk? Did he have another public meltdown? Did he simply lose touch with reality?
It's more complicated than that. It's Gibreel's dreams that become the catalyst for his final descent.
His dreams.
Yes. Remember how dreams have played such a significant role throughout the novel, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy?
Right.
Well, in Gibreel's case, his dreams become increasingly vivid and disturbing. They're filled with apocalyptic imagery, fires, floods, plagues.
It's as if the chaos and violence of the outside world have seeped into his subconscious.
Exactly. And as these dreams intensify, Gibreel starts to believe that he's responsible for bringing about these calamities. He's consumed by guilt over his past actions, his abandonment of his former lover, Rekha, and his struggle with his angelic persona.
It's like his dreams are a manifestation of his inner turmoil, a way for his subconscious to punish him for his perceived transgressions.
It's a fascinating exploration of the power of the subconscious mind. Gibreel's dreams aren't just random images, they're deeply symbolic, reflecting his anxieties, his guilt, and his struggle to reconcile the different parts of himself.
This brings us to one of the most powerful and controversial aspects of the book, the Satanic Verses themselves. In Gibreel's dreams, these verses manifest as a challenge to his faith, a questioning of the very nature of God.
It's a crucial turning point in the novel. Through Gibreel's dreams, Rushdie explores the idea that doubt and questioning are not necessarily signs of weakness, but rather essential components of a mature faith. Gibreel grapples with the idea of a God who is both all-powerful and yet seemingly indifferent to human suffering.
It's a struggle that I think many people can relate to, especially in times of personal crisis, or when confronted with the injustices of the world.
Absolutely. And it's a question that Rushdie doesn't shy away from. He presents Gibreel's struggle with honesty and compassion, allowing us to witness the raw emotional turmoil of a man wrestling with his faith.
So what ultimately happens to Gibreel? Does he find any resolution to this crisis of faith? Does he manage to escape the clutches of his apocalyptic dreams?
Well, that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive, but I can assure you the ending of the Satanic Verses is as thought-provoking and unforgettable as the rest of the book.
So we left off with Gibreel grappling with those increasingly disturbing, almost apocalyptic dreams. His guilt and inner turmoil seem to be manifesting in these really intense images. Where does Rushdie take us from there?
It's interesting you mentioned that connection between Gibreel's inner state and those dream images. It's as if his subconscious is trying to process or maybe even punish him for the choices he's made. Those dreams become a battleground for his faith, his identity, and his very sanity.
And those dreams, along with the pressures of fame and scrutiny, eventually push him over the edge, don't they?
They do. Gibreel vanishes from the Freekirk, leaving Alleluia Cone heartbroken and bewildered. He's returned to Bombay, the city that holds so many painful memories for him. He's drawn back to the place where he experienced his greatest heartbreak. Seeking some form of redemption, perhaps?
Yeah.
Or a confrontation with his past?
He goes back to Rekha Merchant, the woman who jumped from Everest Vilas with her children.
He does, but it's a journey that leads to further tragedy. Rekha is dead, and Gibreel, haunted by her ghost and the weight of his own guilt, ultimately takes his own life. It's a devastating end for a character who started with so much promise, so much potential for good.
It's a powerful reminder that even those who seem to have it all, even those who touch the face of God, as Gibreel does in those early angelic transformations, are still human, still susceptible to the same flaws and frailties as the rest of us.
Exactly. Gibreel's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition, the burden of guilt, and the destructive nature of self-deception. But it's also a story about the possibility of redemption, even if it comes at a great cost.
And In a way, Gibreel's death mirrors the destruction of Jahilia, the city consumed by the fires of fanaticism. Both are consequences of a kind of blind faith, an unwillingness to question or challenge the narratives that shape our beliefs and our actions.
That's a really insightful connection. Throughout the novel, Rushdie seems to be suggesting that blind faith, whether it's in a religious ideology or in one's own infallibility, can lead to destruction. It's the willingness to question, to doubt, to grapple with the complexities of our own beliefs that allows for growth and understanding.
So what about Saladin? We know he eventually returns to India as well. Does he find any kind of peace or resolution in the wake of Gibreel's tragic end?
Saladin's journey back to India is less about finding peace and more about confronting his past. He realizes that he can't keep running from who he is, from where he comes from. He has to reconcile himself with his roots, even if it means facing some uncomfortable truths about himself and his family.
And does he manage to do that? Does he find a way to bridge the gap between his Indian heritage and his British identity?
The book doesn't offer a definitive answer. It ends with Saladin arriving in Bombay, standing on the shores of the Arabian Sea, a place that represents both his past and his future. He's still struggling with his identity, still searching for a sense of belonging.
But there's a sense of hope, isn't there? A feeling that he's finally ready to face himself, his flaws, and the complexities of his own story.
The ending is ambiguous, but it's not without hope. Saladin has gone through a profound transformation. He's shed the layers of pretense and self-deception. He's acknowledged the pain he's caused others and the ways he's betrayed himself. He's ready to start anew, even if he doesn't know exactly what that new beginning will look like.
The Satanic Verses is a challenging book, no doubt. It's full of contradictions, ambiguities, and unsettling imagery. It pushes boundaries and provokes strong reactions, but it's also a deeply rewarding read, a book that stays with you long after you've finished it.
It's a book that forces you to think, to question, and to reconsider your own beliefs about faith, identity, and the power of stories. And in a world where those things are constantly being challenged and redefined, it's a conversation that feels more relevant than ever.
For our listeners, if you're looking for a book that will make you think, a book that will stay with you, a book that will challenge your assumptions and expand your understanding of the world, then the Satanic Verses is definitely worth exploring.
And if you're intrigued by the way Rushdie blends reality and fantasy, history and myth, I highly recommend checking out some of his other works, particularly Midnight's Children. It's a masterpiece of magical realism, and it explores similar themes of identity history and the power of storytelling, but through a different lens.
And as you delve into the world of Salman Rushdie, remember this. The Satanic Verses isn't just a story. It's an invitation to engage in a conversation about the things that matter most, our beliefs, our identities, and the stories that shape our lives